Hey sup guys, welcome back to our channel. So in this video we are gonna see, what if Naruto was 4th great beast and had harem with Yasaka. This is part 1, and if you want more then please leave a like, share and subscribe. Let's get in the video. Ajuka Beelzebub wanted to be somewhere else. He had better things to do than to sit on this exaggerated show of authority and power. Unfortunately, he had no other choice. This was one of those occasions where he needed to attend as a Satan. But at least he was not the one who was taking the brunt of this farce of a show. As his eyes subtly landed on his longtime best friend, Surzich's Lucifer, he could not help but feel sorry for him. At least for Ajuka, all he had to do was sit, nod, and answer a few questions here and there. In a sense, he had to act like a mascot, a prized and glorified mascot to be shown and presented to the mass. He was fine going along with it. But unlike him, Surzich's had to take the full consequences of being a Satan, whether he liked it or not. Satan, is it? Ajuka snorted, seeing the slight twitch on Surzich's index and middle finger of his right hand. Not many know of it, but it was his bad habit when he wanted to blow someone's head off, literally speaking. It did not come as a surprise to Ajuka to see whom Surzich's was talking to. Closing his eyes, he turned away from the discussion. He did not need to listen until the end of the conversation since he already knew the outcome. Even though the term Satan means they should have full authority over the underworld, the truth was very far from it. The 4 Satans did have some hold over the underworld, but their roles were similar to that of celebrities. It was the Bale clan, along with a few other individuals who truly controlled underworld through politics and connection. If he were to put it in human terms, the 4 Satans were the powerful and honorable generals, while those old devils were the crafty and resourceful senators. Ajuka turned to his side to see his friend sitting back down, and his wife stood on the other side of the chair. Although he looked like his usual self, Ajuka did not miss the exhaustion and regret in his eyes. Did they agree? Ajuka knew the answer, but he still had to ask. Just for a split second, Surzich's mask cracked. But he quickly composed himself. After all, his best friend had been handling situations such as these for around 200 years. Putting back the fake smile, he looked down toward the middle of the stadium. They did. Ajuka did not say anything. He did not need to because he knew that there was a but coming. And just like he thought, Surzich's added the last part a moment later. They want to put on a show first. They want me to intervene at the very last minute. Usually, Ajuka did not care much about others if they were strangers to him. But as he looked down, he unknowingly let out a heavy sigh. In the middle of this vast stadium, the devils created a small stage just for her. The little Nekashu girl was no more than 11 years old. 4 powerful devil guards surrounded her, each holding a chain connected to her body. They were presenting her as if she was a notorious criminal. The girl was not crying anymore, but Ajuka could tell she was terrified to the point that she could not express her emotions. It would not be long before she would throw away all those emotions to stay sane. That was not the worst part. All the devils inside the stadium were booing or shouting at the little Nekashu. Some were even making very crude and vulgar remarks. But Ajuka knew many of these devils had taken part in that heinous act the day before. Some should be the ones down there instead of that little girl. But unfortunately, most of these devils were heirs and heiresses, while quite a few lords participated as well. In other words, their hands were tied for the time being. Fortunately, Falbium Asmodeus was personally leading the investigation. He just hoped Falbium would find anything concrete to bring all the guilty ones out in the open. As for punishment, of that, he did not have high hope. It was a mess. It's a mess. Ajuka looked at Surzich's with a raised eyebrow. We are supposed to be different from the old devils, Ajuka. Surzich's murmured, his face still holding that forced smile, but his voice did not. We are supposed to be the civilized ones. And look at what we just pardoned. We have not pardoned anyone yet, Ajuka answered. Though it was vague, he was sure Surzich's got the rest of it. Yes, but we both know. Ajuka knew why Surzich's did not finish. The stadium became very quiet all of a sudden. Their battle instincts immediately kicked in. But instead of showing distress or jumping to action, they calmly looked at the source. There was a 6th member on that small stage now. The fact that their unexpected guest could teleport right into the middle of the stadium without alerting the security them, rang all the warning bells in Ajuka's mind. When Ajuka's eyes landed on their guest, he immediately cast several high-level scan and sensor types of magic on him and around him. From a glance, the man looked like an Oni-type yokai. He had the horns and the physiques of one, but his power, Ajuka could not determine the origin of it. The yokai, whose eyes were closed, had no weapon on him. He was wearing a simple white robe. Underneath it, he had a full-bodied black garment. His outfit looked like one would wear for a formal meeting, not something one would choose when entering an enemy's territory. He was powerful, from what he could sense. At max, he was at medium ultimate class level, maybe slightly lower. But it did not make any sense. And then, he opened his eyes. Ajuka felt his hair standing up on the back of his neck. His power did not increase, his appearance did not change, and yet, he had this sense of foreboding. And he knew his friend was feeling the same without looking at him. His eyes had no irises, just a black ripple pattern spread over the golden sclera. He had never seen or heard about the existence of such eyes. Then Ajuka noticed it. The 4 guards on the stage, although looking at him, were not moving at all. Surziches stood up and stepped forward, and so did he. But he was slightly behind, standing beside Grafia. "May I know who you are?" Surziches asked, although his voice was polite, but his face was devoid of smiles. The being did not answer, instead he turned toward the little girl. They could not hear what he said from here, but his next move made everyone truly wary of him because he destroyed the young Nekashu's bindings by simply touching them. Those were unique chains created by Ajuka to detain even the ultimate class devils. And the worst part, even now, they did not feel any power-ups nor see any abilities being used. Apprehend him right now. Immediately the stadium came to life. Ajuka did not know who gave that order, since both he and Surziches were too preoccupied with gauging out the guest. Because of this, Surziches could not react in time to nullify the order as tens of guards rushed toward the stage. In response, the being only waved his hand. The guards who were going toward him were now going away from him thrice as fast. They crashed onto the wall, and the one after it. And Ajuka could sense that those elite guards would not be getting up anytime soon. The stadium became silent once again. Then the being put his right hand on the little Nekashu's head. And instantly, she disappeared. Ajuka knew Surziches was not the type to make the same mistake twice. So before every devil in the stadium could lash out again, Surziches released a little of his power. A silent command to all to stay put. "My name is Naruto Tsutsuki." His first sentence answered all of his and Surziches' questions. "You are Lady Yasaka's husband, leader of." The Yaokai called Naruto interrupted Surziches, the king of Yaokai. Then he turned his head from one side to another. Ajuka had a hunch that it was not just a simple gaze. "And you should know why I am here." His tone did not hold any anger. It was as if he was stating a simple fact. "For the Nekashu incident, I presume." Surziches turned to look at the speaker. But Ajuka didn't. There was no need since he knew that voice anywhere. It was Zekrom Bale. It was only times like these that he appreciated the old fox. Because when it came to politics, he was the best in Underworld. The Yaokai, Naruto, did not respond as if he was waiting for Zekrom to continue. "Seeing that you just deliberately took away the convict sister, it is safe to assume that you, and in extension, the whole Yaokai faction is housing the convict." Ajuka had to give it to Zekrom. The old devil was a master at manipulating and turning the tables during discussions. He was very good at twisting words and pointing fingers. After all, that was how he became the de facto leader of the devils after the death of the original 4 great Satans. "I will safely return the convict and her sister only if you return the Nekashu clan to us." Zekrom did not stop for a moment. He calmly replied back as if he knew this was coming from miles away, "Are you trying to play word game here, boy?" Ajuka knew he deliberately belittled the Yaokai to get a reaction out of him. Unfortunately, Naruto did not even twitch. Zekrom continued regardless, "If you are here, then you should know what happened to them and why." The self-proclaimed king of Yaokai did not reply immediately. It wasn't easy to distinguish his genuine emotions, mainly because of his eyes. And although Naruto was fully facing Zekrom, Ajuka could feel his gaze on him for some reason. It was pretty unsettling. "You are right. I do know what happened to them. But I cannot comprehend the reason behind this. I mean, there was an agreement between the 2 factions. And as far as I remember, our queen covered all the scenarios in the agreement, even scenarios such as this." Ajuka's eyebrow twitched for a moment. He could sense that Surziches also got uncomfortable at the mention of the agreement. And just like Ajuka expected, Zekrom once again took control of the conversation. "I do not know what lies the convict told you. But here is the truth, she went crazy while practicing senjutsu and killed her master. She ran away before we could capture her. And later, we found out that most of the Nekashu knew senjutsu to some extent. The devils went to the Nekashu clan to apprehend them to be on the safe side. But they retaliated badly, and things escalated." Naruto did not let him finish. "How can things escalate to the point that not a single Nekashu survived, yet not a single devil was harmed?" This time Zekrom came to a complete stop. And this comment made Ajuka frown. Because the only way Naruto could have known about this was. "And last time I checked, according to your laws, the convict was not supposed to be considered a Nekashu, but rather a reincarnated devil." Naruto did not wait for them as he went on. "Also, if she had gone crazy from practicing senjutsu, which is quite laughable to be honest, but I will go along with you, how come she killed only 1 person? And how was she able to run away?" The silence lingered only for a few seconds, but it felt pretty long for Ajuka. Finally, "Are you saying that I am lying?" Ajuka wanted to avoid where this was going. And he knew neither did Surziches. Zekrom was trying to rile up other devils. Zekrum's voice was low. To most devils, it was as if the old fox's voice was filled with pride and warning, but Surzich's, and he knew that it was nothing but a hoax. I will agree that you are making some valid points. But, he took a step forward and let his power out. Not only did you barge in unannounced and took away our prisoner, but now you are mocking me, in our territory. Just like that, Surzich's hold on the devils inside the stadium till now broke. Who the fuck do you think you are? The lowly Yaokai thinks he can talk back to us. Those bitches got what they deserve. And it went on. The once quiet stadium erupted. The anger and the power from the masses were coming in waves. The only reason other devils did not outright attack Naruto was the small barrier Ijuka immediately created between the sitting area and the open field. Surzich's also flared a bit of his power to warn them again, but this did not have as much impact as the first time. And the Satans did not attack him because of the disturbing feeling they were getting. It was not his power, but something about him did not feel right with him. So, this is your answer. The voice was barely audible. And in the next moment, Surzich's was in front of Naruto, his right hand trying to grab the Yaokai by his face. Ijuka was on behind the Yaokai, readying his Kankara formula. He aimed to detain him. Grafia was on top of the Yaokai, gathering her magical energy to create a barrier around them. They finally reacted because, in a split second, Naruto's energy just vanished. From all the way to ultimate class to suddenly nothing. There were only 3 possibilities. One was that the being died in a way that not even a speck of him remained. The second was that he could be readying a technique that required all of his energy. Third, the most worrying one was that his power went to a level they could not properly sense it anymore. In Naruto's case, Ijuka had a hunch that it was the third case. He wished he was wrong, but he knew it was highly unlikely, meaning the situation had changed. And Ijuka would not sit around and wait for Naruto to pull something in the middle of the stadium, not when 1/3 of the stadium was filled with high-ranking devils. Ijuka moved first, but Surzich's followed immediately and took the lead. Grafia was behind to make sure to cover for them. But ultimately, he could not activate his Kankara formula since Naruto disappeared along with Surzich's, right before them. Grafia landed before him, pure shock and disbelief filled her gaze, which slowly turned to fear. And Ijuka was sure that even his eyes were mirroring Grafia's emotions. Then he felt it, the sudden change in the atmosphere. A sudden intense pressure fell upon them. And he looked up, at the source. After Zekrum's enticement, the stadium was filled with shouts of anger at Naruto, which a second later should have turned into cries of surprise to see their Lucifer vanishing. But they were not given that time. Almost all the devils were screaming for their lives as a massive meteorite, at least 7 times larger than the stadium, was falling down. Falling down would not be the right word as the meteorite was barely a few hundred feet above the stadium. Ijuka immediately cast multiple types of scan magic on the meteorite, stadium, and around him. The initial feedback he received did not bode well for him. If he was right, the meteorite was made using an advanced version of Senjutsu. And the faded energy surrounding the meteorite told him it was brought here using high-rank teleportation magic. And the worst part was the pitch-black metal rods. He could not analyze them, no matter how much he tried. They were reacting violently to his magic. If he were to take a guess, those rods were acting as some sort of protection against any devil magic. Yes, he could break them by force. But there were hundreds of them on that meteorite. And he had a hunch that they were connected, meaning if one were to be destroyed or nullified, the rest of the rods would immediately react. For that reason, his first option was out. Ijuka thought of using the Kankara formula to control the power inside the meteorite, and then he would disperse or siphon the said energy. The second option was out as well. It was to use raw energy to push it back or at least hold it off until everyone could go to safety. Ijuka blinked once as he finally noticed the second problem. The devils were not leaving the stadium. No, they could not leave the stadium. The barriers surrounding the stadium had been activated and altered. They were stopping all sorts of teleportation spells. Those spells were meant to keep the enemies out, but now, they kept the devils in. Even a physical barrier with multiple layers was created to prevent the devils from flying away. One good outcome was that the barriers also prevented the devils' attacks from reaching the meteorite. Grafia, destroy the barrier and stop the devils from attacking the meteorite. It has a failsafe trigger, Ijuka said without looking away from the meteorite. Grafia hesitated for a moment before she left his side. In the real world, only a few seconds had passed. Ijuka and Grafia would have reacted faster, but seeing Surzich's disappearing shook them more than he thought. Then it hit him. Within a fraction of a second, all 3 of them came up with a plan and almost executed it. It was to detain the Yaokai King while erecting a barrier to ensure their power clash would not hurt the bystanders. And within the same time frame, the Yaokai King altered the stadium's barriers, brought a humongous meteorite through teleportation, and took his friend away right before them. Ijuka could feel the fear slowly creeping in. Their opponent was dangerous. Shaking those thoughts away, Ijuka focused again. He raised his hands and created thousands of strong but intermediate level levitation and gravity type spells. He placed the levitation ones at the lower part and the gravity ones at the upper part of the meteorite. From afar, it looked like he had just created a pseudo-barrier around it. If any direct attack was out of the equation, then all he had to do was stop it indirectly. The trick was to do it subtly to ensure he did not trigger any of those black rods. He aimed to hold the meteorite in place. The levitation spells pushed the meteorite upward and the gravity spells pulled it upward. He saw the barriers being taken down from the corner of his eye. But Graphia had to calm the devils down forcibly. An arduous task considering she was anything but calm. 1 second turned to 5, then to 10. To Ajuka, it felt like hours. Finally, a few minutes later, the meteorite stopped descending and slowly moved upwards. While the devils started cheering, Ajuka focused on the spot before him. The place where the Yokai King was standing before he disappeared with Surziches. Was it a minute ago? Or 5? But before he could think any further, to his surprise and the horror of the masses, the magical circles around the meteorite shattered all at once. And then he appeared, beneath the gigantic rock. The whole stadium went quiet once again. The scene that greeted Ajuka, he knew that he would never forget it. Surziches was the very first to go beyond the boundaries of ordinary devil ranks, far exceeding even those of the 4 original Satans. He was the strongest super devil and the first devil ever to reach the top 10. His true form was so terrifying and powerful that some dominant beings called him the true monster. And now, the mighty Surziches Lucifer was unconscious, bloody, and missing an arm. The worst part, he was being held by his hair by Naruto, who looked angry. The first one to react was Graphia, who screamed and rushed toward Naruto. The Yokai immediately threw Surziches, as if he was unnecessary baggage, toward Graphia, who stopped midair and caught her husband. Ajuka was seeing red. He knew that his true form was coming out. But he also knew he would play right into the enemy's hand. His left hand gripped his right one to stop it from shaking. The grip was so strong that his hand went numb. He bit his lips hard, drawing blood. The pain gave him a much-needed clarity. Naruto then raised his index finger. This is just the beginning. I will give you 1 week, no more, no less. It will get much worse if you do not follow the agreement to the letter. This is a promise. And Naruto Otsutsuki always keeps his promise. Then he disappeared, along with the vast meteorite. You're not very good at this, are you? Amaterasu sighed. It was more complicated than she thought. The person before her had the aura of a savior and his power. She had never seen any human possess such tremendous power. He was easily a lot stronger than her. As for his personality, it was not bad, but it was not what she expected from someone like him. I mean, no disrespect, but right now, I am supposed to be heading toward the afterlife, you know. I am supposed to reunite with my friends, my parents, my brother. His facial features softened, my wife. Then he looked at her, and although he was smiling, Amaterasu could see that the smile did not reach his eyes. You are asking me to throw away all of that and come to your universe. To fight and lead people I do not know or have never met. Although I understand your distress, I have no reason to make such a sacrifice. Amaterasu wanted to rub her forehead. She knew how ridiculous her plea sounded, but she was out of options. The recent civil war of the devil factions had little effect on other large factions. Unfortunately, she could not say the same about the Yokai faction. Many of the Yokai were either forced or enticed to participate in their war. And many of them did not come back. But the way things were going, the Yokai faction would not survive for too long. Fortunately, the old Yokai leader on his deathbed had a divine revelation. A hero not of their world could save them, both the Yokai faction and the Shinto faction. You are right, I am not good at this. Amaterasu decided to try another approach. There was no reason to play the word game with the person she sought help from. And from the looks of it, it seemed that he was not expecting this kind of reply. Regardless, she continued, I am not going to repeat how bad our situation is. I have already shown you. And you know it is the truth since I cannot lie here. So, I will tell you what we will give you for your sacrifice, as you have put it, and what you can achieve in our universe. First, she raised her index finger, when you reincarnate, I will make sure that you receive the treatment of a king and powerful blessings from us right from the start. I know that you are not the type of person who cares about it, but we will ensure that you receive all the support you need, no matter how insignificant it is, from the beginning to the end. As for the so-called end, you can leave our universe whenever you desire. But I want to be clear on this. The gate we have created to come here will be out of power after I return. And as I have shown you, it may take some time to power it up, but it is not impossible as long as the core fragments are not damaged. He said nothing, so she continued, second, I will try my best so that a few of your precious loved ones can be reborn in our universe. That was the first time she saw him getting outright surprised, but I will tell you this up front. I may only be able to get 2 or 3 people to be reborn in our universe, other than you, of course. And yes, the first point also applies to them. Amaterasu raised her ring finger. Last but not least, the opportunities in our universe are endless. This is fully up to you, but if you become strong enough, you can jump through all the universes and come here to meet your friends and families without the help of the gate. But I have no hand in this, it is all on you. He was quiet. Occasionally, he would scratch his chin. Amaterasu was fine with this since it showed that at least he was thinking about the offer. Finally, he spoke, you are quite generous with your offers. Considering our circumstances, this is the least I can do. Amaterasu chuckled. Fine, you got my attention. But I want to confirm a few things before giving my final decision. His voice was neutral. Of course, Amaterasu nodded at that. First, you use the term reincarnate for me, but rebirth for others. May I know if there is any difference? It seemed that he was far sharper and brighter than she thought. With a smile, she answered, reincarnate means that you will be born with all the memories from this life intact. In simpler terms, reincarnation means that your soul will change bodies. You will have all your knowledge, memories, and skills, everything spiritual. And in rebirth, the soul will be reborn again. In a way, it is a whole new start for that individual. Seeing him raising an eyebrow, Amaterasu decided to explain it a bit further, knowing what bothered him, best if I say through an example. Let's say your wife went through rebirth. She will still be the same kind and gentle person, since that is one of her core characteristics. But depending on how she will grow up and how she will handle the events occurring around her, she may become more forward. Who knows, she may become slightly mischievous, maybe even a bit adventurous. Both his eyebrows shot up. And she might become more endowed than her previous self. He frowned now, but his lips kept twitching. Now that's bullshit. Except for Tsunade Bachan, no one came close to Hinata in terms of assets. Amaterasu openly laughed, you will see for yourself if I am right or wrong. I wish I could also reincarnate them, but I do not have that much power to spare. But like you, she will regain her previous memories if she becomes strong enough. And as I said before, it is all up to the individual in these circumstances. He shook his head slightly, for what reason she didn't know, that's nice to know. Then he relaxed again, you said I will be given royalty treatment. I am not the type who bothers about these, but I do appreciate your concern. What I want to know is how much will I be monitored? Amaterasu expected the question but not in this manner. It seemed he was covering all the delicate parts through a blunt approach. You will not be monitored at all. I, and other major Shinto gods and goddesses, will ask you to perform some tasks. And at the end, we will see the result, not the process. Amaterasu answered truthfully. Seeing the doubtful look, Amaterasu elaborated, if we ask you to protect our people, we do not care how you do it, as long as you get the job done. You can slaughter all the enemies, strengthen the defenses, or use your charm to make the enemies join you, in the end, it is all up to you. Awesome, he nodded his head. Suddenly he stopped and looked straight at her, what if I don't like certain tasks? This, she was expecting, instead of outright telling no to our face, I would appreciate it if you are diplomatic about it. And just to be clear, you are our partner not servant. Noted, he replied with a wide grin. Anything else? Amaterasu asked. 2 more questions, he immediately reacted, first is, you indicated that I can become as strong as you, a goddess. Just how powerful I can be. Honestly, I do not know. Amaterasu sighed, I will be direct here. You are already stronger than me right now. And I can say for certain that you will only grow stronger. You may even become powerful enough to go toe-to-toe with some of the top gods in our universe. The possibility is low, but it is there, yes. WHOA that was not what I had in my mind. He actually faltered at the answer. That is why I approached you. Someone who would, not for a single moment, go astray no matter how powerful they become. Unlike that brother of yours. Amaterasu snorted at the end. Hey, Sasuke is a good guy, he just had a very rough childhood. He defended his friend just as she had expected. Seeing her blank stare, he grumbled, fine, let's change the topic. So, my final question is how will you reincarnate me? Another question she expected beforehand. So the answer came quickly, if you agree, then I will take your soul to our universe. There I will see which yokai body has the best compatibility with your soul. After some modification, I will insert your soul into the body. It will take weeks or months for your soul to adjust properly to the new body. After that is done, all that will be left is for you to get used to your new body. Yokai? Not human? He asked. Amaterasu was glad he did not take it that badly, unfortunately, there are some complications that will make it risky for me to insert your soul into a real human body. The fault is not from our side, mind you. But on the bright side, you can easily live up to hundreds of years as a yokai. That's good to know, he nodded slightly, and what about this body modification? That one? Amaterasu grinned, I was thinking of taking a soul sample or two from this universe. Seeing his blank stare, she elaborated, soul sample is something like DNA, but in spiritual form. Then combine those with the yokai body to create the perfect vessel for you. His fox-like grin stretched from ear to ear, something which she took as a positive sign. "So? Do we have a deal?" Amaterasu asked, her tone was delighted. She could not help it. He did not answer for some time and refrained from eye contact. She knew he was thinking, but the silence was too intense for her. Finally, he looked at her. He made a fist with one hand and held it before her. The underworld, politics, it was one of the main reasons Ajuka did not want to take the Lucifer title. He would rather be doing something productive than coordinating a council meeting. Unfortunately, with Surziches incapacitated, he had to hold the line. Currently, he along with the remaining two Satans were listening to the bickering of the clan heads. He leaned back on his chair and watched as Seraphol and Falbium were trying desperately to calm down the clan heads. Occasionally, rude comments were thrown at them, but they took them calmly. Usually, Seraphol would have retorted back just as harshly and Falbium would not even care, but Ajuka guessed they were feeling guilty for not being at the stadium today. But he knew. He knew that it would not have mattered anyway. "Ajuka. You should gather a small platoon of strong devils and raid Kyoto." Ajuka blinked. He turned to look at the devil who addressed him. "Lord Aguirre, are you talking to me?" He ensured that his tone hinted that the old devil was going out of his line. But it seemed that his hint had not gotten through. "Are you even listening to us?" This time Lord Barbados shouted. It was not just him, most of the lords were quite furious with the situation. And who wouldn't be? A single yokai came out of nowhere and destroyed their power standing in the supernatural world in mere minutes. And through some twisted logic, the devil clan heads blamed this disaster on the young Satans. Ajuka's lips twitched just for a brief moment. Then he let out his power. This was not the first time a Satan would release their power to take back control of the council. But there was a slight difference this time. Unlike Surziches or his other friends, Ajuka did not filter his power. After all, he was in no mood to play the politics game. The hall immediately became deathly quiet. "Are you sure it is a good idea to take that kind of tone with me, a Satan?" Ajuka let out a humorless chuckle. "According to the law, which all of you agreed on, if Surziches is incapacitated, I have to take over the lead. Since it has never happened, I should get this out of the way. I am not Surziches. I will handle the situations differently from Surziches." Then his gaze went over all the heads, most of whom had difficulty breathing. Seraphol and Falbium were fine, somewhat, but they were mostly surprised. "Lord Beelzebub, I think this is enough." Ajuka gave a sideway glance to Zekrom Baal. He was also one of the few not significantly affected by his power. But he could still see the sweat glistening on the old Baal's forehead. The tone sounded humble, but Ajuka knew it had power behind it. Unlike theirs, pure raw power, the old Baal's power came from his wisdom and shrewdness. Regardless, Ajuka backed down. The situation was already out of their control, no need to add more fire to it. Ajuka waited for everyone to compose themselves. It took a minute or two for everyone to get back on their feet, figuratively speaking. But no one started any more commotion. Receiving a nod of acknowledgement from his fellow Satans, he began, "Now that I have your undivided attention, I want to discuss one fact before going to the main point." He discarded the murmurs of disagreement and continued, "We had an agreement with the Yaokai faction 5 years ago. A simple non-aggression pact and acknowledgement of the lands belonging to the 3 Yaokai clans. The Nekashu, the Kurooni, and the Arachan. The reason they were staying in the underworld was because they were born here. The only changes in the contract were made 1 year ago. It was to update the clauses since the Arachan clan packed up and left. They even gave us most of their land. I think it was done with good intentions. And how did we repay that good intention? We all agree that the Nekashu incident was a blunder on our part. But this is not the time to point fingers." Zekrom stood up for the devils once again. Ajuka sighed and looked at Zekrom straight in the eyes. "Unfortunately, I have to disagree on that strongly, Lord Zekrom Baal." Not waiting for his retort, Ajuka turned away. "I know all of you are angry, but not more so than Lord Gremory and me. After all, because of the sheer stupidity of some devils, my best friend, his eldest, is now in a coma. So, you want us to apologize?" Zekrom asked. His voice did not have a prideful tone, but a subtle challenging one. After all, it was impossible for the 4 Satans to ask of that from the general devil populace. It started as a slight chuckle, but soon turned into full-blown laughter. Ajuka could not help it. He knew he was scaring the shit out of all the clan heads, but it was just so ridiculous, the ignorance. When his laughter was under control, he looked at all the lords. It was subtle, but most clan heads had wary expressions. He stood up and everyone flinched. "It seems not a single of you understands the true depth of the situation. Although in the contract we were given some leeway, it was stated there, over and over again, that not a single Yaokai should be harmed or face injustice. They even stated, which we agreed on, that in the worst case scenario, we are only allowed to barricade their clan home, nothing more. In that scenario, the leaders of the Yaokai faction would reach out to us directly to settle the matter as peacefully as possible. Then Ijuka turned to Zekrom, "You have seen him today, talked to him, saw what he did. Do you really think he wants an apology after what the devils did?" If Ijuka was not looking at Zekrom intently, he would have missed the old Bale's surprised look. But it came and went so fast that he was sure no one else saw it. "What do they want then?" Lord Grimmery spoke up. He was the quietest among the clan heads today. It was understandable. Since this was the first time Lord Grimmery had seen his son like this, not even in the Civil War did Surziches ever lose this badly. "As I stated before, I am quite furious. I want to go to Kyoto and kill that bastard for what he did to my friend who had nothing to do with this incident. Consequences be damned." Ijuka's gaze sharpened and his body trembled momentarily as he remembered that scene once again. But it's not that simple, is it? It seemed that Zekrom was finally starting to see how bad the situation was. But still, to Ijuka, the old Bale barely uncovered the surface. "With all the information I have so far, I was able to come up with around 200 different scenarios. In 2/3 of those scenarios, this incident blows out of proportion and turns into a full-scale war. And at best, the final outcome of this conflict is, from all those scenarios regardless if it turns to war or not, both factions come to a tie with minimum losses on both sides." Ijuka stopped just for a second. It was not for a dramatic reason. He stopped because even he knew how ridiculous it sounded when the words came to his mind. But that was the cruel truth. With a heavy sigh, Ijuka finished, "And at worst, we, the devil faction, will face extinction." It took a few seconds for the words to sink in. And when the clan heads finally emerged from their stupor, the hall erupted in chaos. Ijuka thought of using his previous method of taking back control. But one devil beat him to it. Zekrom only stood up and most of the devils quieted down, not entirely as they were murmuring among themselves. But this alone shows how much authority and respect he possessed. He did not turn to face other lords, just looked at Ijuka wearily. "As much as I would love to call it bullshit, I know just how good you are at predicting future events. So, can you tell us how and why you think these Yaukes can win against us?" Politics and convincing devils were not Ijuka's forte. But explaining was. So, he was glad that Zekrom was controlling and steering the crowd in a way where it would be easier for him to do so. Ijuka started, all the while rubbing the bridge of his nose. "Seeing that this Naruto has defeated Surziches, we can clearly say that powerful individual-wise, the Yaokai faction gets the first point." Quite a few lords wanted to argue, but one look for Ijuka and Zekrom stopped them. "I know what you are going to say. It was a fluke, a trap at best. But let me remind you that Surziches is not a novice fighter. He earned the title Lucifer. He earned that title after defeating the descendants of the original Satans. He would not fall for something cheap, and not like that. So, if this Yaokai defeated Surziches purely based on traps, then he is far better than me and Falbium combined, as a strategist. And if he had defeated him in a straight fight, then he may be someone who reached the top 10, very recently, I presume. Unfortunately, the one who can tell about him the best is Surziches. So until he wakes up, all I can do is to make assumptions." The moment Ijuka was done, he immediately raised his hand to stop the protests from arising. He released a long breath and continued soon after, "Now, all of you are going to argue that it is just a single individual. You would say that I, along with Seraphol and Falbium can take him out, maybe we can. But there are several problems there. First, we do not know if the Yaokai faction has any stronger individuals. The only other powerful Yaokai that we know of is Yasaka, who may be able to go toe-to-toe with Falbium or Seraphol if she empowers herself by taking energy from the Li line. Do they have any more individuals? That we do not know. Second, their Yaokai king delivered the first blow swiftly and strategically, putting us in a terrible position. If we, even a single Satan, go out in the human world and pick a fight, it will surely put the whole devil faction in the spotlight, not in a good way." Ijuka stopped to take another break. He was glad that many of the lords had a thinking face. But some fully understood where he was going as their face had gone pale. Taking another deep breath, he said, "Lastly would be the Yaokai faction as a whole. From what we know, Yasaka married this Naruto Otsutsuki 10 years ago out of the blue. Then the Yaokai faction went through some changes. We thought it was just some subtle changes, but the clues were there. It became tough for the devils to locate any Yaokai villages or clans. Even most of the clans that were here in the underworld moved away. So, if I am not wrong, Naruto has united all the Yaokai clans, regardless of their sizes and locations. And it is safe to assume that, by now, he also created a strong military to serve him. Some of you might argue that their military is no match against ours in terms of pure number and power. But let me remind you why the Nekashu incident started in the first place. Some of the Yaokai clans had techniques that far surpassed ours. So, if Naruto militarized these clans, our soldiers will have a hard time against them." By the time he was finished, the hall had become very quiet. Some pictured the whole scenario and became nervous, and some were still processing the idea that there was a chance that the devils would lose against the Yaokai faction, a faction that they thought was small and insignificant. Will it not be better to strike first, like a covert operation? I mean, we know they are in Kyoto, right? Lord Phoenix stated. Do we? Ajuko let out a tired chuckle. If you did not notice, in the contract they stated themselves as the Yaokai faction instead of the Kyoto Yaokai faction like before. There is no concrete proof, but I am sure Naruto had moved their main base. How can you be sure? Lord Citri asked. Because I would have done it. Silence reigned once again. A few minutes passed, but no one uttered any words, even Seraphol and Philibium became speechless. Finally, Zekrom spoke up. So, what do you suggest we do? Ajuka did not answer immediately. He just maintained eye contact with Zekrom for a few seconds. Then he looked up and let out a heavy sigh. We prepare for war, but hope it does not come to it. The Avalon Kingdom, Naruto. Lord Naruto. Naruto-kun. A gentle touch on his shoulder broke him from his trance. Naruto looked around to see the concerned faces staring back at him. With a sigh, he lightly tapped the hand on his shoulder. Are those two girls fine? She smiled, they are fine. The little one may need additional treatments, but they will get back on their feet in no time. Naruto knew he had already asked this question more than 10 times. And each time, she would answer it in full and in a tender tone, without a slight hint of any irritation. That's good. Lord Naruto, he turned toward the voice, this is a dark time for us. And we need you more than anything. So, please, do not blame yourselves for what happened to the Nekashu clan. August, even if you say that, the fact remains that I have to shoulder those deaths. I should have tried harder to bring them back instead of making that agreement. Naruto leaned on his chair. Yasaka's gentle touch on his hair was helping more than he thought. He knew he should ask her to take her seat in this formal meeting, rather than staying beside him and babysitting him. But he badly needed this, and everyone in the room knew it. You gave the devils a chance. You wanted to see the best of them. August added quietly. And the Nekashu clan paid the price, Naruto replied. He could not help but let out a mocking smile. They paid the price with their lives because of my naivety. It's not your naivety, her voice calmed him down again, this is who you are. You always look for the best in people. You always see beyond their races and labels. He wanted to argue, but she put a finger on his lips and continued with a gentle smile, and because of that, because of you, this is where we are. A miracle even by God's standard. When Naruto looked down, she used the same finger to lightly bring his gaze back up again. I know that this is a tragedy. A tragedy that none of us wanted to happen. But it did happen. If you want to make up for it, then give the Nekashu clan the justice they deserve, in your own way. Make sure that those two girls will smile for the rest of their lives. I know you can and will do it. And regardless of the final outcome of this incident, I know you will become a better man, just like always. He and Yasaka held their gazes for some time. Finally, Naruto broke their eye contact by closing his. He wanted to hug his wife now. He wanted to bask in her presence, take shelter in her aura, but now it was not the time. With that in mind, he turned to the last person, Jiraiya, how far is it? By tonight, every supernatural faction will know the truth about the Nekashu incident. The answer was swift and to the point. It seems even Jiraiya was in no mood for light-hearted conversation. No one spoke for some time as everyone was waiting for him. Naruto understood that, but he also knew that from now on, his actions would drastically change the course of history once again. Mobilize the Anbu and call back all the Denkai. His words shocked everyone, even Yasaka. Naruto, the first one to compose was Jiraiya, as always, exactly what are you planning to do? Jiraiya, they did not massacre the Nekashu clan. They killed the children, raped the young, and tortured the old. The moment those words left his mouth, all the listeners' power burst out. If this room were not specially modified, the whole city would be shaking by now, literally. Naruto raised his arm and released his own power to overlap theirs, to calm them down forcefully. After all, even with all the enchantments, the room had its limits. When everyone calmed down, he began, I am not a murderer. And I refuse to stoop to their level. But I promise you this, I will cripple their faction. I will do whatever it takes to ensure the devil faction gets what they deserve, not a penny less. Everyone nodded in acknowledgement. And then Yasaka asked, my love, you know this will bring our faction to the spotlight, right? Lady Yasaka, as much as we would have liked it to be under favorable circumstances, we cannot let this pass, not after what they had done. August spoke up, and his tone clearly showed how angry he was. Unfortunately, August is right. But if we can do this correctly, then our faction will be seen as a humble one, rather than a dangerous one, Jiraiya added. Then he scratched his chin and looked at Naruto, I will ask Shu and Zhang to stop his expedition and return. We will need his input on this. I will also notify all the Denkai. Knowing the situation, I am sure they will be here by midnight. Alright, Naruto took a deep breath, we will continue once everyone is here. Naruto did not say anything else. August and Jiraiya got the cue and got up. With a polite bow, they excused themselves. When the door was closed, Naruto got up and hugged Yasaka, his forehead touching hers. Yasaka closed her eyes and gave him a knowing smile. Naruto felt himself calm down as Yasaka's divine energy started entering him. The reason why his mind and energy were so agitated was because of Senjutsu. In this universe, Senjutsu would take in the malice and ill will floating around the world. It was bogus if he was being honest, but there was nothing he could do about it. Usually, it would only affect him if he focused on it. So, when he went to the underworld and concentrated on the malice around the Nekashu clan to see what had happened, it was too much: the hatred, the agony, the cries for help, so many strong negative emotions that he was overwhelmed. He saw what happened there. And the fact that he could not do anything but watch shattered his heart. He wanted to save them, he wanted to revive them. But there was nothing left to revive. And their souls were so twisted that it was better to send them off properly. But purifying so many corrupted and hateful spirits took its toll on his own mind. So, he needed to cleanse it, something he could do himself in a few hours. But he wanted those screams to stop. That was where his precious wife came in. From that day onward, Yasaka would use her divine energy to calm him down. And since her divine power was purer than his, it worked wonders. He was 100% sure that if it were Sasuke, unlike him, he would have annihilated half of the devil population regardless of the consequences. For a brief moment, the thought did cross his mind. But he was not like that. Of course, crushing Surziches helped a lot. To be honest, Naruto did not have it planned out at all. He wanted to confront the devils directly, and depending on the outcome, he would have taken the next step. He did not think Surziches and others would react like that. So he took Surziches to his pocket universe to talk with him while making sure other devils would stay busy. Unfortunately, the Red Satan screwed up badly. The fault lay with him as well, but the moment Surziches uttered those words, Naruto lost it. He became so angry that he did not think about the consequences, he did not know about the difference in their power level. He did not think at all. He just lashed out with everything he had. He was glad that Surziches activated his true form right at the start of the fight, otherwise he would have delivered a corpse rather than a battered comatose body. He screwed up in the fight and he knew it. Some would say that it was not his fault. After all, who would believe that the almighty Surziches, in his true monstrous form, could not even survive a minute against him? Naruto underestimated his own power. But regardless, he was not frustrated because of what he did to Surziches, not after what his faction did to the Nekashu. He was just frustrated at himself. "My love." Feeling the gentle touch on his cheek, Naruto opened his eyes and met his wife's concerned gaze. With a smile, he stepped back and kissed her forehead. "I am fine." Yasaka smiled back, caressing his face. "It's alright, my love. I know that you need to rest right now, more than anything. But you have to report to Lady Amaterasu about this first." Naruto nodded and took a deep calming breath. "I will meet her now." He paused and then looked at her. "How's Kunu?" "She is fine, Naruto, you just did not see her for one day." Before Naruto could retort, Yasaka put a finger on his lips. "I know that you will feel guilty if you see her now. She will remind you of all the innocent children you could not save." Naruto looked away at that statement. His wife really knew him well. "I will clean up your schedule for a few hours. After the meeting with Lady Amaterasu is done, come to me. I will relieve you from all those memories." Naruto nodded in acknowledgement. Giving him a light kiss, she took some steps away from him. It seemed she meant he had to go now. With a sigh, he gave her a tired smile, and she returned a gentle one. Naruto released a breath through his mouth and straightened his posture. He cut the tip of his index finger using the nail from his thumb. And as a single drop of blood came out, Naruto's hand blurred as he created a complex magic symbol. When he was done, he put his palm on top of the circle and just waited. The last thing he saw before his surrounding changed was Yasaka's smile. "Quite a mess, is it not?" "It is," Naruto answered after he made a polite bow toward Amaterasu, his patron goddess. Right now, he was at her main office. Only a few had direct access to this place, including him. But he did not sit down immediately. He looked around, and his eyes fell again onto the table beside them. The table had multiple stacks of papers, and all of them were arranged and signed on their own. It was as if an invisible person was doing the job, multiple ones from the look of it. He could not help but let out a chuckle. Back in his home universe, all the Kage would wage wars to get that technique. Then he turned to Amaterasu who pointed at the seat in front of her. Naruto flopped down on the chair, groaning, "You know why I came here, right?" Amaterasu waved her hand, and the spacious room glowed. After she was done, Naruto gave her a look who understood the meaning and nodded her head in response. He looked to the side and saw the change in his eyes in the mirror. His normal azure eyes faded away. His white sclera was soon replaced with a golden hue, and the black ring spread out from the middle of his pupil. He did not know why his Rinnegan had a golden hue unlike the normal silver-purple one. It was a mutation, yes, but only appearance-wise. He did not receive any unique powers yet. When the transformation was over, he looked over her room to ensure it was tight and secure. When he saw it was, he nodded at Amaterasu. "I know why you are here," Amaterasu sighed. She paused momentarily before starting. "All the Shinto gods and goddesses truly feel sorry for what happened to the Nekashu clan. But they are unsure if it is the right time to come out." Naruto understood the problem, but he wanted to hear directly from her. And it seemed she got the cue. The Shinto faction was never anywhere near the top, be it power or authority-wise. "But now that we came so far because of you, everyone fears losing you. You think I will lose?" Naruto arched an eyebrow. "Against the devil faction, no. But what if the whole biblical faction or the Hindu faction starts to aim for you? You have seen how greedy and crafty those two factions are," Amaterasu explained. "I am not sure about the Hindu faction as a whole, but I know for a fact that the Trimurti will not come after me. On the contrary, Shiva will willingly defend me if the situation worsens. As for the biblical faction," then Naruto gave his trademark fox-like grin, "I do not think they will come after us immediately. Not after seeing our faction's spectacular appearance." "Oh," Amaterasu leaned onto her chair, "another of your unexpected strategy." Naruto chuckled openly at that. "The Grigori faction, do you think it's true?" Azazel looked up from the note to meet Tobio's gaze. The boy was confused and angry. He could not blame him, any normal person would be. With a sigh, the fallen governor pointed at the seat in front of him with his head. While Tobio was sitting down, he created a small fire on his palm and burned the note. "So? Yes, it's true. The massacre did happen yesterday." Tobio clenched his fists when he heard Azazel's answer. His black hair shadowed his eyes, his voice trembled. "I thought they were different from the old devils. The current four Satans are young. Contrary to everyone else's beliefs, they do not have full control over the general devil populace." Azazel's voice was tired. "That's a shitty excuse." Tobio barked, "1 or 2 Nekashu is one thing, but the whole clan. No matter the consequences, the Satans should have intervened." "Yes, they should have. And now they are paying the price for it dearly." Tobio blinked. Then he frowned. "What do you mean by that?" Azazel did not answer immediately. He took the Hellblazer bottle from the table between them and refilled his wine glass. As he put the bottle back down, he looked at Tobio. "Do you want some? This is going to take a while." "I am fine," Tobio immediately rejected. "Also right now, I do not feel like touching anything that belongs to the underworld." "Suit yourself, we might not be getting this for some time," Azazel chuckled dryly. Azazel, the fallen governor, knew Tobio was not impatient. But this was one of those sporadic cases. "I received a letter from Seraphol. The Yokai king made a spectacular entrance and had put Surziches in a coma." He gave a hearty laugh when he saw Tobio physically retreating back at his words. He couldn't blame the boy, even he had almost the same reaction. Surzich's Lucifer was put in a coma. Tobio's tone was that of disbelief. "Yup. According to Seraphol, he was kidnapped right under their nose, and 5 minutes later, his bloody unconscious body was returned. She did not say how badly he was injured, just that his condition is now stabilized, but he is still in a coma." Azazel paused to take a small sip from his glass. He savored the taste briefly before adding the last part, "and one person did all of this." Tobio did not say anything back for a minute or two. Azazel understood that he was processing the thought that one of the strongest amongst the 3 factions was easily defeated, who also made his way to the top 10. "Wait, doesn't it mean that the Yokai faction has someone who is amongst the top 10? Azazel smirked at Tobio's assumption. And he knew that his protege was almost there. Tobio let out a small breath when he saw the grin on Azazel. "This is not going to end well, is it?" "My boy, the Nekashu incident will be the catalyst for a new change in the supernatural world. And it will be a drastic change, I can guarantee you that." Azazel took another sip, his eyes gleamed with amusement. He knew that Tobio would understand the meaning behind his tone and gaze. "So, what am I missing?" Azazel chuckled. Now only if Tobio were interested in women, then he would have made the perfect protege. But that thought was for later. Now he had a history lesson to give. "What do you know about Naruto?" "Not much, all anyone knows about him is that out of nowhere, he married Yasaka 10 years ago." His answer made Azazel's mood sour, making Tobio groan. "Come on now, don't get sidetracked. You wouldn't understand, she was my second love." Azazel pouted. "It was lust, not love." Tobio corrected it, and it sounded more like an automated response. "HMPH." Azazel loudly snorted. "You haven't seen her, alright. She is the only woman besides Gabriel with a perfect body, a full 10 out of 10. And I have seen a lot of women. She even has that thing, you know," Azazel grumbled as he clenched his fist, "a gentle aura with a killer body. That combination is lethal for any male, I tell you. You are just frustrated that someone got her." Tobio sighed. "I should have tried harder. I thought she was an unobtainable flower like Gabriel." Azazel released a deep breath and his shoulders slouched down so much that he looked like a deflated balloon. "You done?" The fallen governor gave a flat stare to his pupil. With a grumble, he chugged down the rest of the wine and refilled it again. I wanted to bash your husband's head so badly. But I did not do it only because I knew he would be the one bashing me. Azazel gave an embarrassed chuckle, and seeing the frown on Tobio's face, he shook his head. No, I knew he was stronger than me, but I did not know he was this strong. How did you know he was stronger? Azazel did not answer. It was not that he did not want to, but he was trying to see how he should start. Do you know August, the first Fae? Azazel asked all of a sudden. Yes, Tobio answered, confused. He is the leader of the fairy faction, right? Words have it that he was seen during Yasaka's wedding as one of the important guests, no less. I thought that the wedding ceremony was a very private affair. Azazel sighed. The boy was right. The Shinto faction was very tight-lipped regarding Yasaka's marriage. No one knew precisely where and when the ceremony took place. It was done in such a fashion to avoid unnecessary commotions. Because Azazel was not the only one who was smitten by the shrine maiden, there were quite a few from different factions who wanted the gentle yokai. Some of them were pretty powerful and dangerous. But the sigh, Azazel tilted his wine glass toward the boy. Tobio, this is just an assumption, a really mind-breaking one if he was being honest, but from all the clues I gathered, I think the fairy faction and the yokai faction have merged. What? The shock was so much that Tobio stood up, his eyes bulged out. Are you serious? Azazel just nodded. Tobio just stood there with his mouth open for a few seconds. Finally, he sat down tiredly. Won't this merging make this new faction as strong as one of the gods' factions? Azazel nodded to confirm Tobio's question. It was not a ridiculous notion. After all, right after the three factions and all other mythological gods' factions, the yokai faction and the fairy faction were the top two factions in terms of power and size. The vampire faction was also one of the top ones before the separation. But the chuckle, Azazel added, also, there was this rumor that the Yokai King gave Tiamat a beating for insulting Yasaka. These are just rumors and assumptions, right? Tobio asked. He could not help but snort at that, such a naive boy, brat, every rumor has some truth in it. And the assumptions they are created based on the hints left behind by the original events. Tobio nodded. Azazel could see that the boy was processing everything. Usually, he was faster, but this time, there was just too much outrageous information. Tobio sighed loudly. Will this start another war? The jolly expression entirely left Azazel's face. I won't lie to you. There is a chance. And it may escalate to the point that even the Grigori and the Heaven will have to join, unwillingly of course. But this depends fully on the Devil faction and the Yokai faction. Shouldn't we try to stop it? Tobio said, more like he pleaded. Azazel shook his head. Unfortunately, the Yokai King already took a few steps. Seeing the inquiry look, he asked, the note Sun Wukong gave stated that the news is spreading throughout the supernatural world, right? Yes, Tobio firmly nodded, he said that to me also. I believe that by tomorrow almost all the factions will know of the Nekashu incident. You do realize that the reason this news is spreading so fast is because of the Yokai faction, right? Tobio nodded at the question, so Azazel asked another, also, that the Nekashu incident is being told from the perspective of the last two survivors, right? Tobio nodded again. This time Azazel smiled as he asked the last question, but did the Yokai point out, in any way, that their king has defeated the Surzich's Lucifer? Tobio blinked. The realization face he made after that only increased Azazel's amusement. Taking another sip of the wine, he added, his tone had a tint of admiration to it, it's quite a crafty tactic, I must admit. Because if they added that, then instead of focusing on the Nekashu incident, all the other factions would focus on the fact that there is someone new on the top 10. The Yokai faction does not want that, for now, they want everyone to know the truth about the massacre and focus on the devils. And using this opportunity, they are isolating the devil faction. I mean, who would side with them if a war does break out? And the best part, the devils are playing right into their hands. Tobio visibly shook at the last sentence. He frowned but did not ask anything. With a chuckle, Azazel started elaborating, the devils will not release the fact that Surzich's was beaten. Even if they did, they will not admit that he was beaten fair and square. They will come up with excuses. Same for the Nekashu incident, they will try to come up with excuses. Lastly, they will send platoons, mostly to recon or to have small skirmishes to gauge out their opponent. Even though this is the right way, but to other factions, it will only seem like the devils are using baseless excuses to go to another war. The look of realization came to his pupil as he pointed out, so when the Yokai faction strikes back hard, no one will side with the devil faction. Azazel nodded, satisfied that Tobio could come to the correct conclusion. So, what are you going to do? Azazel raised an eyebrow at the question, seeing which Tobio went on, I am sure Serafo did not send you a simple message regarding only Surzich's condition. She asked for your help, right? He is getting better, though he did not say it out loud. Azazel let out another pleased smile, yes, she asked for my help. Well, I like the current Satans, I will not put the Grigori into the crossfire for their incompetence. I will just say that the Yaokai faction has become strong, through hints mind you, so they should be careful. Also, if they want to come out clean, they should deliver capital punishments for those who participated in the massacre, regardless of their statuses. Tobio once again just stayed silent and processed his words. And it seemed he had given too much to the boy for one night. His protege stood up, gave a slight bow to him, and walked toward the door. To others, it would seem like a sign of disrespect, but Azazel did not mind. He knew that the boy badly needed to get some fresh air. That was why he did not stop him. He also knew that when Tobio cooled down, he would come again. Azazel took another sip of the famous wine. He looked at his half-empty glass and sighed. Too bad I am not going to get this anytime soon. Thanks for watching guys, hope you enjoyed this one. If you do, please leave a like, share and subscribe. Take care, bye.